Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
By the time the last moon of Thalen cracked in orbit, the people of Iller had already stopped believing the universe was listening. Their world was not built for war. Iller was an ocean planet of silver blue tides and living coral cities, where towers were grown, not forged, and where children learned symphonies before mathematics. Their skies shimmer with ribbons of harmless radiation that painted the atmosphere in soft veils of violet and green. Their ships were elegant things, crescent-winged and translucent, designed for trade, diplomacy, and pilgrimage. For 10,000 cycles, they had never needed anything else. Then the Var Dominion came. No one on Iller understood where the Var had begun. They appear on the edges of known space like a plague of iron locusts, black-hulled ships vomiting fire, and machine swarms. Their first transmission had been simple and identical in every language they translated it into. Submit your industry. Submit your orbitals. Submit your offspring for labor tithe. Resist and be cleansed. Most worlds submitted. Some resisted and burned. The Illyrians tried diplomacy first. They sent envoys in pearl-white vessels bearing grain cultures, medical crystals, and ancient songs encoded in light. The Var destroyed the first delegation without replying. They captured the second and broadcast their dissection. The third delegation never arrived. After that, the war lasted 17 days. On the 18th, the Var fleet hung over Iller like a second night. Grand Tide Mother Selvae stood at the center of the spiral chamber, with a planetary council gathered beneath a dome of living glass. Outside, the sea thundered against the lower terraces as evacuation barges fought to escape the bombardment. Each distant impact trembled through the coral walls like the heartbeat of a dying god. "How many remain in orbit?" she asked. The answer came from strategist Marone, his gill fronds pale with exhaustion. 42 defensive craft, honored one. 12 can still fire. The moon batteries are gone. The northern ring has fallen. We estimate planetary breach in less than 3 cycles. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some wept openly. Others folded their four-fingered hands and stared at the glowing floor, as if unwilling to meet the truth. Selvae looked up to the chamber's central hologlobe, where blue icons marking Illyrian ships winked out one by one beneath the red swarm of Var signatures. The enemy had not simply defeated them. They had erased them with the cold efficiency of a harvesting machine. "Have the pleas gone out?" she asked. Communications keeper Aerie bowed her head. To every registered polity within relay distance. To the League remnants, to the merchant guilds, to the shrine worlds, to free stations beyond the veil. No reply from most. 2 refused. One said they grieve with us. A bitter sound escaped Marone. Grief does not stop bombardment. Selvae did not rebuke him. He was right. Aerie hesitated, then added, "There's one final possibility." The chamber quieted. Aerie touched the control spire, and a star map rotated into view. Far beyond the neat web of familiar routes, beyond the sectors the Illyrians considered civilized, there flickered a dim marker at the edge of navigable space. The room stirred uneasily. "No," whispered one counselor. "The death world." Another said, making the word sound like a curse. It was an old rumor, half dismissed by serious scholars and repeated by traders who liked to frighten hatchlings. A world of crushing gravity, unstable tectonics, venomous life, violent weather, predator-rich ecosystems, and apes clever enough to split atoms before mastering their own tempers. A species born in a place where almost everything could kill them, and so they had learned to kill back better than anything else. Humans. Their world name translated poorly into Illyrian. In most tongues, it was simply filed under the old hazard classification, Death World Category Prime. "We have no treaty with them," said Counselor Neff, no embassy. "No cultural compatibility index. Their conflict history is legendary. They warred among themselves before they reached their second moon." "And survived," Aerie whispered. Silence. Everyone in the chamber knew the stories. Human boarding troops who fought through vacuum leaks and hull fires because retreat offended them. Human medics who would walk into plague zones with bare fear in their throats and still keep moving. Human miners who drilled into unstable starside rock because it was profitable. Human civilians who lived under skies full of storms that could tear towers from bedrock. Human soldiers who wrote jokes on missiles. Madness by Illyrian standards. Or perhaps exactly what was needed. Selvey stepped closer to the hologlobe. Do they answer distress calls? No one agrees, said Eri. Some say they ignore politics. Some say they sell aid. Some say if you beg them at the wrong time, they conquer you themselves. And some what? Eri's voice thinned. Some say if they believe you've been wronged, they come angry. Another impact boomed above them, and dust rained down in glittering motes. Marone straightened. Then let anger be our final weapon. Counselor Neff rounded on him. You would summon predators into our house? I would summon a storm if it killed the fire. Selvey closed her eyes. In the old rites, there was a prayer spoken by sailors crossing Blackwater trenches. It was not a plea for mercy or safety. It was simpler. If drowning must come, let something larger rise first. When she opened her eyes, the decision had settled in her like stone. Open the deepest channels, she said. Eri's hands trembled over the controls. To what priority? Selvey stared at the distant marker labeled with human transliteration codes, and for the first time in her long life, she addressed an unknown species, not as equal, not as ally, but as last hope, to desperation. The chamber darkened as power flooded into the long-range arrays. Across the dome, ancient emergency glyphs ignited. The message recorder unfolded from the floor, a ring of crystalline lenses focusing on Selvey's face. She stood straight despite the tremors, despite the fear, despite the knowledge that this recording might outlive her. This is Grand Tide Mother Selvey of Iller, she began, her voice carrying to the chamber and out into the stars. To any who hear, our world is under extermination assault by the Var Dominion. Civilian centers are targeted. Our surrender was refused. Our children are being taken. Our oceans burn. Her throat tightened, but she did not stop. We have asked the known stars for aid. None can come. Some will not. If there exists beyond our maps any power willing to answer, any fleet, any people, any soul that still remembers mercy, we beg assistance. Eri signaled that the transmission was stable. Selvey stepped closer, and her reflection glimmered in the lens like a ghost underwater. Then, choosing instinct over protocol, she added words none of her advisors had approved. To the humans of Earth, if the stories are true, if you are real, if your hearts are as terrible and fierce as rumor claims, then hear us now. We do not ask for conquest. We do not ask for empire. We ask only that our people not die alone. The chamber was utterly still. Selvey lowered her head. Please, she said, help us. The transmission launched. It leapt from relay to relay, through pirate nets and abandoned probes, through weather-stained listening buoys and derelict trade beacons. It crossed graveyard sectors where only scavengers listened. It skimmed the outer dark where maps grew uncertain and old fears returned. It passed through the ruins of stations destroyed by the Var. It crossed silence, and in the far reaches near Sol, where the void was busy with shipyards and patrol lanes and the endless labor of a species that had never learned to sit still, someone heard the prayer. The first to receive it was not a diplomat or an admiral or a politician. It was an old cargo dispatcher on Luna, one-eyed and sleepless, reviewing emergency traffic while drinking terrible coffee from a mug that read and owed panic until fire. He listened to the message once, then again. Then he sent it up the chain with a single note attached. This one's bad. Civilians. Kids. Somebody wake the fleet. On Mars. In the basalt command halls beneath Olympus Mons. Alarms began to ring in sectors reserved for existential threats and humanitarian catastrophe. Officers stumbled into lit corridors, uniforms half-fastened. Screens filled with the face of Grand Tide Mother Selvey, with orbital footage of burning coral cities, with intercepted VAR transmissions cataloging labor value harvests. A silence heavier than noise spread through the command deck. At its center stood Fleet Admiral Helena Ward, gray-haired, square-shouldered, eyes like old iron. She watched the footage without blinking. Around her, analysts compiled casualty predictions. Tactical projections bloomed red. Probability trees estimated fleet response times and diplomatic fallout. One young lieutenant cleared his throat. Admiral, the Var Dominion has not formally engaged Terran territory. The Council will want. Ward held up a hand. The lieutenant shut his mouth. The final line of Selvey's plea replayed over the speakers. Please, help us. Ward asked very quietly. Did they really broadcast a harvest of civilians? Yes, ma'am, said intelligence. Multiple confirmations. Children? Yes, ma'am. Another silence. Then Fleet Admiral Helena Ward inhaled once and said the sentence that would later be etched into memorial stone on 12 worlds. Signal all ready groups. Humanitarian Intervention Authority, Black Tier. Muster every hull that can make burn within the hour. The bridge erupted. Officers snapped into motion. Orders screamed through relay channels. Dockyards flooded with activity. Dry dock destroyers came alive in showers of sparks. Carrier crews sprinted through launch bays. Long idle warships woke from cold sleep, reactor hearts igniting one by one across the darkness of Sol. The young lieutenant, still pale, dared one final question. Ma'am, what rules of engagement shall I transmit? Admiral Ward kept her eyes on the burning world on screen. For a moment, the only sound was the rising thunder of a fleet awakening. Then she answered. Tell them, she said, wrath authorized. The Var Dominion had a doctrine they called the geometry of victory. It was taught to every commander from larval officer cast to war prime. War, according to geometry, was not passion, chance, or chaos. It was math. One applied force at the correct angle, in sufficient volume, at the proper time, and resistance ceased. The weak called this cruelty. The Var called it efficiency. Subjugator Kelt, commander of the Third Reaping Spear over Iller, believed in the geometry with religious certainty. From a command dais of his flagship Iron Shroud, he observed the conquered planet below through a tactical display of exquisite precision. Iller rotated beneath him wrapped in smoke, its oceans reflecting weapon fire in amber scars. Orbital debris formed a glittering ring of ruin around its equator. On the tactical grid, blue marks indicating surviving local resistance had diminished to statistical irrelevance. Surface pacification at 73%, intoned one of his tacticians. Labor harvest phase? Kelt asked. Prepared. Coastal population centers are ideal for containment. Yield projections exceed initial estimations by 11%. Kelt clicked his mandibles in approval. Transmit to all divisions. Preserve industrial biomatter where possible. Religious and artistic sites may be stripped for reactor feed after compliance. A subordinate lifted his head, and the plea they transmitted? Kelt did not look away from the display. Ignored. Interception arrays detected the message reaching extra-regional channels. Good, said Kelt. Let others hear and learn. A shiver of amusement passed among the bridge officers. That was the point of spectacles, like Iller. Conquest was useful. Terror was economical. The Var did not merely destroy worlds. They made examples of them. One officer approached the dais. Subjugator, a final issue remains. Long-range ghost signatures at the border of the system. No recognized transponders. Kelt turned slightly. A rescue fleet? Uncertain. Initial mass profile suggests inconsistency. Clarify. The officer hesitated. The incoming formation is too dispersed for formal military doctrine, too large for merchant traffic, and too fast for civilian craft. They are burning hard enough to stress harm their own engines. Kelt's upper eyes narrowed. Species origin? Unknown. That earned his full attention. The Var did not fear unknowns. They cataloged them, then consumed them. Still, uncertainty had a texture to it, and now it crept faintly across his bridge. Magnify. The tactical display shifted. At the edge of the system, beyond the outmost gas giant, white-hot vectors had appeared like spear points dropped by a god. There were many. Too many. Their drives were savage, overbright, each plume leaving distortions in deep space as if the ships were arriving in a hurry no sane engineer would permit. Were there challenge codes? Kelt asked. No response to hails. They have not acknowledged warning buoys. Then designate hostile unknowns. A moment later, a second officer spoke, voice tight. Subjugator, they're transmitting now. Project. The bridge dimmed. Static snarled across the chamber, then resolved into an image. Not a flag, not an emblem, a human face. The being stared directly into the transmission lens. Its skin was lined with age and old scars. Gray streaked its hair. Its eyes were predator forward, unblinking, and so calm that several VAR on the bridge felt instinctive unease. When it spoke, the translation engine struggled for a moment, then rendered the voice into VAR command tongue. This is Fleet Admiral Helena Ward of the Terran Defense Armada. You are engaged in mass atrocity operations against the sovereign civilian population of Iller. You are ordered to cease bombardment, release all captives, power down offensive systems, and prepare for inspection. A hush spread across the Iron Shroud. Ward continued. Failure to comply will be interpreted as confirmation of hostile intent. The message ended. For one breath, no one moved. Then the bridge erupted in harsh laughter. A primate, barked one war prime. They sent a mammal? Inspection? Hissed another. They arrive in a war posture and speak like customs officials. Keld himself gave a low, contemptuous click. Humans, he said, drawing a name from old archive fragments. Peripheral Deathworld scavengers. Fragmented polity. Excessive emotionality. Noted for internal violence and unstable diplomacy. He turned back to the display. The incoming fleet count continued to rise as more signatures translated into system space behind the first wave. How many? Current estimate, said Tactical Control, voice no longer steady. 308 capital-class hulls, 640 escort and screen elements, numerous logistics trains, medical ships, and auxiliary craft in non-standard configuration. Auxiliary, the officer swallowed. Converted industrial ships, subjugator. Bulk freighters carrying spinal weapons. Tug frames fitted with missile racks. Civilian hulls under military command authority. A low murmur moved through the bridge. Keld did not join it. So, he said, they are desperate enough to arm merchants. No, subjugator. Another officer whispered, reading fresh data. Their merchant hulls volunteered. This time the silence lasted longer. Keld strode down from the dais, looming before the central display. He studied the enemy formation. It was not elegant. VAR battle arrays were symmetrical kill geometries, layered for mutual coverage and optimized resource expenditure. This human fleet looked almost crude by comparison. Multiple vectors, independent clusters, overlapping attack cones, escort screens that flex instead of holding rigid pattern. It looked wrong, like a pack instead of an army, like predators surrounding prey. Open a channel, Kelt said. The image of Helena Ward returned. Kelt raised himself to his full height, armor crests flaring. Human Admiral. This system is under lawful dominion subjugation. Withdraw, and we may record your trespass as ignorance rather than provocation. Ward did not blink. You're done here. Kelt spread his clawed hands in a gesture of theatrical patience. Do you understand the force before you, mammal? I command 81 warships. I have already broken this planet. You have arrived too late to save it, and too far from your home to survive your mistake. Ward seemed to consider that. Then she leaned slightly closer to the camera. You made one error, she said. Kelt's mandibles twitched. And what error is that? Ward's voice did not rise. It did not need to. You hurt civilians where humans could see. The channel cut. Across the VAR bridge, laughter did not return. Kelt opened his mandibles to issue fleet maneuver orders, but alarms beat him to it. Multiple launches. Human missiles? Negative. Boarding torpedoes. Range impossible. They fire from that distance? Correction. They fired earlier under engine shadow. The tactical plot burst into chaos. The first Terran move was not a frontal advance. It was a calculated avalanche. Missiles emerged from behind decoy signatures and drifting wreckage, swarming outward in obscene numbers. Electronic warfare blooms flooded the battle space, blinding VAR target locks with false returns, shrieking signal ghosts and spoofed thermal flares. Simultaneously, human attack elements split into independent packs and accelerated at brutal vectors that any Var helmsman would have rejected as structurally reckless. Kelt roared for counterfire. The void lit up. Lances of particle energy tore through the dark. Kinetic slugs flashed like newborn stars. The first rank of Terran ships took hits, and kept coming. One destroyer lost half its bow in a blast that should have killed it, then rolled broadside and emptied its missile tubes anyway. Another vented atmosphere in a glittering cloud, spun end over end, and rammed a Var interceptor hard enough to break both ships into molten debris. "Madness," whispered one Var tactician. "No," said Kelt, though he could not keep the uncertainty from his voice. The human fleet struck the Var left flank with all the grace of a collapsing mountain. Where Var doctrine prized centerline efficiency, Terran doctrine embraced initiative. Individual captains exploited micro-openings before Central Command could even register them. Corvettes dove through weapons fire to cripple shield emitters. Frigates interposed themselves to protect hospital ships moving toward Illyrian evacuation lanes. Marine pods punched into damaged Var hulls and erupted inside them with gunfire and breaching charges. The human auxiliaries, those converted civilian vessels Kelt had dismissed, hung to the rear and lobbed enough missile mass to drown targeting computers. And beneath it all ran something stranger still. The humans were communicating constantly, not in stiff command chains alone, but in rapid, overlapping bursts of ugly creativity. Sensor intercepts translated fragments no of our strategists could comprehend. Fox 3, eat the you rusted centipede. Medic lane open on Vector 6, move your ass Mercy 2. Rook actual, I've got borders and events, and they're extremely rude. Tell Dagger wing the squid-faced bastard on my screen is mine. Laughter. Actual laughter in combat. It spread unease to the Var more effectively than any weapon. Kelt watched one Terran cruiser take a direct spinal hit that cored its midsection in white fire. The ship should have died. Instead, the remains of it altered course using maneuvering thrusters and debris momentum, slammed into a Var assault carrier, and detonated its reactor at point-blank range. Two of our escorts vanished in the blast. The Terran fleet did not slow. Subjugator cried tactical control. Their rear elements are bypassing us. Kelt spun. Toward the planet? Yes. Multiple formations descending through bombardment envelope. He understood then. Not conquest. Not glorious annihilation. Rescue. The humans had come not merely to kill his fleet, but to tear open corridors for evacuation under fire. He had no doctrine for an enemy willing to split strength in order to save strangers. Recall harvesting barges, he snapped. Concentrate fire on descent vectors. Collapse on their carriers. The iron shroud shuddered so violently that officers crashed into their stations. Impact. Starboard armor breach. From what? The answer came with almost disbelieving horror. Human tug, subjugator, industrial hull. It rammed us. Kelt stared at the display. A squat, ugly vessel with docking clamps still welded to its spine had driven itself into the iron shroud's flank. Fires raged through both hulls. Even as damaged crews swarmed, the tug's emergency channel burst across VAR frequencies. A human voice, crackling with smoke and delight, shouted, "Docking successful, you bastards!" Then came muffled gunfire. Boarders. Actual boarders from a civilian industrial ship. Kelt's bridge became a storm of orders. Security teams mobilized. Bulkheads slammed shut. Casualty reports spilled in faster than they could be processed. Across the battle space, his perfect geometry was unraveling under the pressure of foe that did not behave properly. They protected their wounded. They screened civilian escape lanes even while advancing. They used wreckage as cover. They sacrificed formation purity for local advantage. They became more dangerous when damaged. And worst of all, they seemed to grow angrier the longer they saw what the VAR had done to Iller. Below, the planet's surviving population watched through smoke-choked skies as unfamiliar warships tore burning lines across the heavens. Some thought at first a second invader had arrived. Then escape corridors opened through orbit. Then medical drops descended. Then the VAR bombardment faltered. along the coast of Narrow, where thousands huddled beneath shattered reef arches awaiting death or capture. Children pointed upward as great metal shapes screamed through atmosphere trailing fire. The craft were blunt armored, ugly things with heat-scar hulls and white insignias painted across their sides. One landed so hard the beach glass beneath it. Its ramp slammed down. Figures emerged in sealed combat armor, helmets black-visored, rifles ready. Behind them came medics carrying fold-out stretchers and crates of emergency rations. One of the armored figures looked at the cowering Illyrians, then removed their helmet. A human woman, face streaked with sweat and soot, knelt in the ash so she would not tower over the nearest children. Her translator clicked online. "You're safe now," she said, though the sky was still burning. "We're here." Far above, on the iron shroud, subjugator Kelp finally felt something he had not experienced since larval combat trials. Not caution, not anger, fear, because the prayer of a dying world had been answered. And what answer had arrived furious? On Iller, the first human most survivors ever saw was not a soldier. It was a medic. They came down through fire in armored landers painted with red crosses, white crescents, blue stars, and a dozen other symbols from the old nations of Earth that had somehow survived into the stars as traditions, if not borders. Their craft landed in bomb craters on shattered plazas, in tide flats full of wreckage and dead coral, and beside hospitals that no longer had roofs. Humans spilled out carrying not only guns, but blankets, sealant foam, blood packs, field generators, trauma kits, portable desalination rigs, and enough emergency nutrient paste to shame the remaining Illyrian food vaults. To the Illyrians, it was bewildering. The stories had spoken of Deathworlders as conquerors wrapped in iron and instinct. What came ashore was indeed wrapped in iron, but half of them were kneeling in debris to splint broken limbs, purging toxins, or carrying frightened hatchlings whose parents had vanished in the bombardment. At the ruins of Pelismer, where a civic dome had collapsed into the sea, Human Marine Staff Sergeant Lena Orloff stood thigh-deep in cold floodwater, passing survivors hand-to-hand into a rescue raft while tracer fire snapped overhead. "Easy, easy," she muttered, though none of the Illyrians understood her words. Tone was enough. "I've got you. You're okay. Move, 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 Doc. I need pressure gel here." A small Illyrian clung to her armor, trembling so violently its frill membranes fluttered. Orloff glanced down. The child's lower left arm bent wrong. Its skin had gone nearly gray with shock. Orloff slung her rifle, lifted the child one-handed, and shouted toward the medics. "Pediatric priority." The translator on her collar rendered the phrase into melodic Illyrian. The child stared up at her with enormous black eyes. "You came," it whispered. Orloff did not know the language, but the translator did. Her expression changed beneath the soot and adrenaline. For just an instant, anger sharpened into something sadder. "Yeah," she said softly. "We came." Elsewhere across the planet, the pattern repeated. Human engineers sealed breaches in undersea habitats, while naval gunfire rumbled on the horizon. Search and rescue teams crawled into unstable coral towers no local survivor believed could still stand. Drone swarms mapped safe evacuation routes through burning kelp forests. Marines established perimeter lines not around strategic resource points, but around schools, medical sanctuaries, and refugee columns. The VAR found this incomprehensible. Their doctrine held that terrorized civilians clogged roads, consumed resources, and served as leverage. Humans treated civilians as the objective itself. Again and again, VAR tactical opportunities opened when Terran units exposed themselves to extract wounded non-combatants. And again those same units fought with a kind of animal fury once the civilians were secured. By the second day of intervention, every surviving Illyrian understood one thing. Humans were kind in the exact same way storms were kind when they broke a drought. Violently. In orbit, Fleet Admiral Helena Ward watched casualty numbers rise on both sides and refused every suggestion to slow the push. "Ma'am, the VAR Center is giving ground," reported Commander Ruiz from Tactical Analysis. "Recommend consolidation before overextension." Ward kept her hands clasped behind her back. The bridge around her was dim save a flood of battle light across their displays. Her flagship, the TSV Resolute, had taken 9 confirmed hits and continued to bleed atmosphere from decks 14 through 17. No one on the bridge mentioned it anymore. How many Illyrian evacuation windows remain open? Ward asked. 3 reliable lanes. Maybe for the Bastion keeps eating fire like a lunatic. Then we press. Ruiz grimaced. The fleet is tired. Ward nodded once. So are the civilians. No one argued after that. The Terran strategy had evolved from shock assault into controlled dismemberment. They no longer tried to meet the VAR in set-piece exchange. Instead, they ripped out function. Sensor webs first, then command relays, then logistics, then engines. They isolated VAR ships, overwhelmed them with local superiority, and moved on before the rest of the Dominion formation could recover. It was ugly warfare. Close range, personal, very human. On the port side of the VAR battleship Harvester Dawn, a breach team from the 9th Terra Marines advanced through smoke-filled corridors lit by failing red emergency lamps. Their armor was blackened. One man limped from a servo tear in his exosuit, and the point trooper's shield had half melted under plasma scoring. Lieutenant Ushvin Bale looked at the schematic flickering on his wrist. "Reactor access 2 decks down," he said. "Take it, and this tub drifts." Corporal Jensen spat blood into his helmet recycler. Politely asking the giant murder bugs to surrender is off the menu then. Bale checked the feed from his rear drones. VAR security forms were regrouping. Very much off the menu. Cool. They moved. Gunfire erupted around a bend, bright and savage in confined passage. Human rounds punched armor. VAR plasma hissed through bulkheads. Someone screamed as a shot burned through their shoulder plate, and another Marine dragged them into cover without breaking stride. A grenade bounced once, twice, then turned the corridor ahead into a white furnace. Bale vaulted through the smoke before it cleared. That was the piece outsiders never understood about humans. It was not that they lacked fear. It was that fear rarely settled the matter. On the Iron Shroud, Kelt's empire of certainty was dying by 1,000 impossible cuts. His reserve flotilla had been annihilated trying to pursue Terran hospital carriers. 2 troop barges mutinied when labor prisoners overwhelmed their depleted guards during a human jamming strike. 3 more warships had gone silent after Terran boarders breached life support junctions and vented compartments selectively rather than waste time taking the entire hull. Human marine doctrine seemed designed by engineers and psychopaths collaborating enthusiastically. Worse still, the Illyrians themselves had begun to resist again. At first, they had hidden, dazed, and broken, but hope is a weapon if returned in time. One civilian saw of our ships burning in the sky and humans holding defensive lines on the ground. Scattered local resistance cells reawakened. Ocean skimmers armed with industrial cutters attacked isolated VAR landers. Temple keepers who had never touched a gun-guided Terran units through flooded sanctuary tunnels. Illyrian technicians reactivated damaged moonlit defense stations with human power cores and fired them manually from radiation-flooded chambers. Everywhere, the impossible infection spread. Resistance. Kelt tore through reports until one at last froze him still. "Subjugator," said Intelligence Control, voice quivering. "Human transmissions are targeting Dominion external channels." He bared his teeth. For what purpose? The officer turned the screen toward him. A VAR language broadcast had been hacked into every active battlespace frequency. The image showed liberated Illyrian civilians being escorted into medical triage zones. Human medics treated wounded children beside armed Marines. Behind them, crates of food and water were unloaded under covering fire. Then Admiral Ward's voice overlaid the footage. "This is the fate of worlds under Terran protection." Live. The image changed. Now it showed the wreck of a VAR cruiser splitting apart under concentrated human fire. Ward's voice continued. "And this is the fate of those who prey on civilians." Kelt stared in disbelief. "They are making propaganda during battle?" "No." "Subjugator," whispered the officer. "They are making a promise." Kelt finally understood something essential and terrible. The humans were not here for territory, nor tribute, nor prestige. They were here because they had taken offense. An offense to a Deathworld species had become a moral engine, On the third day, the decisive blow began not with cannon shot, but with a rescue signal. Beneath the southern hemisphere, in the trenches of the Mirath Deep, one of Iller's last refuge domes reported imminent breach. 40,000 civilians were trapped in a failing abyssal shelter, while VAR excavation walkers descended to cut through the roof and extract labor stock. Local Illyrian defenders were exhausted and nearly out of power. Terran command estimated less than 40 minutes until collapse. The nearest human force was not a rescue group. It was Carrier Battle Group Hecate, engaged in brutal close action against a superior VAR cluster near the orbital tether remains. Ward received both updates simultaneously. Ruiz looked up from the plotting well. We can save the deep shelter or finish the VAR cluster. Not both in time. On the bridge, every officer knew what the optimal military answer would be. Ward answered anyway. Redirect Hecate. Ruiz shut his eyes briefly, then nodded. Aye, ma'am. Thus the battle bent. Terran carriers peeled away under furious fire, launching atmospheric strike craft so hard that pilots blacked out on descent. VAR commanders, seeing apparent retreat, surged to pursue, straight into kill boxes prepared by lurking Terran missile barges and railgun monitors. The resulting ambush shattered one flank of the Dominion line. Meanwhile, Hecate's dropships plunged into Iller's storm-racked sea. At the Mirath Deep Refuge Dome, survivors listened as the outer shell groaned and cracked. Water jetted through fractures with lethal force. Children cried in the dark. Elders recited ocean prayers. VAR cutting beams burned down from above like spears of hateful sunlight. Then came another sound, a thunder from the trench walls. Human breaching charges. The side of the abyss erupted outward. Floodwater boiled. Through the spray, armored submersible frames burst in carrying Terran combat divers and engineer teams in pressurized assault suits. Floodlights blazing like descending stars. Their leader, a broad-shouldered human with a shark grin painted on his helmet, cut through the shelter access ring and shouted through external speakers. Emergency pickup. We're making a door. The VAR walkers turned to engage. They never got the chance. Hecate's strike craft screamed out of the dark water overhead, releasing shaped torpedoes that folded the walkers into clouds of twisted metal and steam. More Terran units flooded the trench, planting support pylons, welding patch plates over breaches, and guiding civilians into evacuation pods while exchanging fire and water. So black it might as well have been space. One Illyrian elder, carried on a Terran diver's back through the freezing current, looked up into the armored faceplate and asked, through a choking translator, "Why would you do this for us?" The diver kicked upward through rising debris and answered as though the truth were simple. Because somebody asked. When the Mirath Deep shelter was evacuated, the news spread across Iller faster than any command directive could. Whole districts began repeating the human phrase in broken translation. Because somebody asked, it became prayer, then doctrine, then courage. By dusk of the fourth day, the VAR Dominion no longer held orbital dominance. By midnight, they no longer held initiative. By dawn, they held only pieces of collapsing fleet, scattered ground detachments, and the sinking certainty that they had chosen the wrong prey. Subjugator Kelt remained aboard the wounded Iron Shroud as his empire of equations failed around him. Human ships closed in from multiple vectors. Fires raged through 7 decks. Internal border alerts still flashed where Terra Marines had penetrated engineering sectors. The tug that had rammed them had long since burned away, but its crew had opened a wound that never closed. One of Kelt's remaining officers approached, bleeding from a neck seam. "Subjugator," she rasped. "We can still flee. A core cluster 12 hulls may break to the outer ring if we abandon harvest assets." Kelt stood very still. He looked at the tactical plot, at the human ships, at the evacuation lanes full of fleeing Illyrian civilians, at the wreckage of his fleet, at the species he had dismissed as unstable scavengers from a death world. For the first time, he understood the ancient instinct all prey animals know and all tyrants forget. Never corner something that can choose wrath. "Signal retreat," he said. The officer stared. "For all remaining vessels?" Kelt's voice had gone hollow. "For any that can run.